Disclaimer. First of all, some aspects of this story are potentially disturbing, so if you are sensitive, read at your own discretion. Sorry if my story is all over the place. I don't have the best organizational skills in writing. The years aren't exact, they are just a spacer. Also, the revenge isn't necessarily interesting and or funny, but I believe it still works. The beginning. From the beginning, Hank had been involved in my life. A family friend and a member of my parents' church. He worked in the nursery and watched over me. He always helped out with children's programs in the church and even watched over me outside of the church. Since he was a friend of my father's, it didn't seem weird when he got me gifts, took me places, or gave me a little spending money. Also, he had a son my older brother's age, Jim, that my brother was friends with. Year 1, when I was in the 6th grade, I was around 10. My brother would hang out with Jim every Sunday after church, and I wanted to come too because I wanted to be like my brother. Obviously, they didn't want me around, so while they were ignoring me, I developed a friendship with Hank. We would play video games together in his basement for hours until my brother and I had to leave. I don't know when exactly it happened, but one day Hank was standing behind me watching me play when he ran his hands over my body. I was confused and didn't know what to do, but it didn't matter because just as quickly as it started it was done. It was stupid, but I continued to come over and occasionally he would do it again. He started threatening me that if I told anyone he would know and he would kill me, and that if I wasn't allowed to stop coming so my parents wouldn't wonder why. Although it didn't happen often, it was picking up, but he was also taking me more places. I didn't like being with him, and I did at the same time. Year 2, around 7th grade, things picked up. Whenever I came over he would touch me, and he would do it for longer each time. Even when he took me out, and when we were at church, he would take me into bathrooms. Around this time, even though I still wasn't sure what I was feeling, I started to resist his actions, and consequently, he started the physical abuse. He would hit me with whatever was around, books, computer keyboards, etc., and punch and kick me. Once, he stabbed me in the back with a syringe. Around this time he started taking me to a pool. At the pool, he would touch me in the water, and had me touch him in the shower and use my mouth. Year 2.5, the summer after my 7th grade year, my church went on a camping trip to a lake. My parents didn't really do that stuff, but Hank and Jim invited my brother and I to come with them. Since my brother was always with Jim, Hank had almost 24-hour access to me. During this trip, Hank was on me whenever he had the chance. Year 3, around my 8th grade year, is when the verbal/psychological abuse started. Hank decided to take the route of constantly demeaning, degrading, and insulting me every chance he got. On top of his words, he started making me wear a leash, crawl around on all fours, and eat dog food, all while naked. He even had a collar made that said "Hank's little bitch." Now this whole time I had been dealing with mental illnesses that were only worsened by what he was doing. That year I started really cutting, and I tried killing myself multiple times, which landed me in the psychiatric hospital twice. After coming out of the hospital for overdosing, Hank took me to a movie and explained to me that he was going to stop. He said he really cared for me and didn't want me to end up dead, and he really did. I was free, but my mind was still conflicted, and I was still scared of him, so I didn't tell anyone. I slowly did my best to go to church less and less. The aftermath, that wasn't the end of my hospital trips. Even without his abuse I was mentally unstable. I kept cutting and attempting for years. It was bringing down my education and my relationships with family and friends. Finally, when I was in 10th grade and in the hospital, I let it slip to a therapist that I had been abused, and she helped me tell my parents. Slowly, I was able to tell my parents a little of what happened and eventually, who did it. The revenge. As soon I said it was Hank, it started. First I talked to a police officer, although I could barely say anything. Then I was brought to an establishment designed for kids to talk about what has happened to them. I talked to a woman and told her all about the abuse. Well, the sexual abuse. I was still scared, and I couldn't bring myself to mention the physical or others. The case against Hank started, and they started looking for the evidence. One day, I let it slip to my parents that other abuse happened, causing me to go back, and this time, I told them everything. They got their evidence and arrested Hank, but that didn't mean it was over. The worst of it was still coming. It was one thing to talk to one person who was trained to talk to me, but now I would have to testify at a trial. I had to relive my experiences sitting across from Hank, and then I had to be interrogated by his lawyer. Luckily, I was stone-faced. I was able to talk to his lawyer without breaking down. I don't really remember exactly what was said, but Hank's lawyer wasn't the best, and some of my responses to his questions made the people in the court laugh a little. After that was the real thing, a trial with 12 strangers sitting there listening to my pain. During the pre-trial, I was kind of quiet and scared, but I went into that courtroom the day of the trial and confidently told everyone what the bastard had done. The result: guilty on 1 count, child abuse 3rd degree, 2 counts, child abuse 2nd degree, 2 counts, criminal sexual conduct, 2nd degree, person under 13, defendant 17 or older, 1 count, criminal sexual conduct, 3rd degree, person under 13, defendant 17 or older, 1 count, criminal sexual conduct, 1st degree, person under 13, defendant 17 or older, sentence 25, 40 years. The house we live in was built at the same time as hers. My parents were often at the construction site and help if they can. The strange lady was nice to us at the beginning, but that changed soon. This happened around Christmas 2017. We have a neighbor who is very unpopular in our neighborhood. She is well known for harassing people who use the public path at the left side of her house. The path is 1 out of 3 to reach the public playground behind her house. If someone uses the path, she would scream at them that this is her path on her private property, which is wrong. Sometimes she would close the path with a red and white plastic chain and won't let anyone use the path. She would scream at kids on the playground when they were loud at daytime. She always has her shutters almost down so she can stalk the people on the street and stay unseen. If some kid's ball landed in her garden, she would bring it to the kids and destroy it with a knife right in front of them. All kids knew this and would run by her house if they wanted to go on the playground. When the neighbor's kids were playing in the winter outside in the snow, she would call the CPS equivalent in my country and tell them they were locked outside by their parents as a punishment. If someone walked by her house at night, she would often call the police due to a noise complaint. She was known by everyone in our neighborhood as the witch, but she hated my family in particular. We lived right beside her house. Our houses shared one wall. When me and my sister were young, we would use the swing in our garden or jump on our trampoline. She would regularly file noise complaints and often harass me and my sister when we were alone in our garden. If my parents heard her screaming swear words at us from the first floor of her house, they would yell back. If me or my sister walked on the path by her house, she would scream at us. We used the path daily on our way to school. One time when I came home from school, she was in her car with a trunk on the sidewalk. When I walked by the back of her car, she howled the engine and the dark exhaust hit me. Almost every night she would hit the shed wall with something to wake us up. Sometimes she ring on our door and try to make us go to other neighbors to complain about small things. We often had lawsuits with her. One time because her trees grew 2 meters over the border. Another time because she built a fence by sticking bamboo mats in the dirt and tearing it down the next day and telling the police we destroyed her wooden fence. We won all lawsuits against her because my uncle, he's teaching law school, gave us good advice on how to deal with her and named lawyers he knew were good. She never paid the workers who repaired things at her house and the electrical and water bills. When her old car broke down, she didn't pay the car mechanic and never got her car back. She was in debt and had a mortgage on her house. When the foreclosure came, we were at the court and bought her house. She was with us in the courtroom when the auction was and tried to buy her own house, but wasn't allowed because she couldn't provide proof that she has enough money. We bought her house where she lived for 20 plus years in front of her. We bought it because my parents were at the construction of her house and knew the workers did a great job at building it. We renovated it when she left. We repainted all rooms, renewed the insulation, and put everywhere where no tiles were new wooden floor. My grandparents will be moving in her old house this fall. I live in a 10-story apt building in a dense part of a city with numerous other tall complexes, but also a number of old single-family homes. One such home abuts my building, directly under my 8th floor apt. The long-time owner has had a pigeon coop in his backyard for years. The birds smell and are a nuisance, but no big deal. Then about 6 months ago, the owner took it upon himself to dump 20 pounds of bird seeds in his backyard daily, attracting 200 to 250 city pigeons. They are ferals that lived in a nearby park, but once the feeding started, they ended up hanging out my neighbor's roof most of the day. Every day. Complaints to him to desist were fruitless. Numerous neighbors also complained to city officials, but they were useless. Animal rights activists on our city council who halted a pigeon control program a few years back as cruelty to animals are very pro-animal. They refused to take action under the pretext that there is no sort of nuisance law the city could use in this case. The smell from pigeon shit in his yard progressively got worse, and the birds started roosting on our property and crapping on parked cars. Several disgruntled neighbors, including me, pondered a solution for months. A neighbor and I arrived at a solution, artificially escalating the nuisance level of the problem, specifically the bird reek, so the city can no longer ignore the nuisance. It had to be logical, secreted and calibrated. Someone couldn't throw dog poop onto his property and expect an outcome. Long story short, we concocted an odorous slurry, using my 8th floor balcony directly over the pigeon lover's backyard. I gave it a gradually increasing midnight sprinkling of slurry, which disappeared into the grass in his messy backyard. Within 1 week the increased odor emanating from his property reached 1/2 block away. Suddenly the problem was resolved. We did not see the official action, but word was that several prominent businessmen who own a restaurant down the street complained to the mayor about the stench. The city took action. The guy's now only allowed to keep about 15 pigeons in coops, no more feeding the ferals. An unorthodox solution to a problem that needed to be dealt with. If you enjoyed the stories, slap the like and subscribe button for more of them, and don't forget to support the original writers with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.